All right, Jono, we are back. This is episode 4, and this is the podcast where we get stuck into cost and risk. What else would we need to speak about? Nothing, because it can all be encapsulated in cost and risk.
That's right. Cloud Reset. Welcome back to episode 4. Welcome to our loyal listeners. And that's right. We've got a special guest today, and I think it's going to be an interesting episode just for something different. We'll probably talk about cybersecurity because, who's had enough of that? Don't panic. We're going to make it interesting and ask a few curly questions.
Absolutely. I don't think we need to apologise to talk about security. It's always a hot topic. So, and I think our guest is really going to help us bring that to life. So let's get rolling.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so we are here today with our special guest, Jason Mural. Jason brings to us 2 decades of experience in startups in the technology industry. He's the chair of the Australian Cyber Network and also the chair of the Dynamic Standards International. As the chair of the ACN, Jason leads a national effort to position Australia at the forefront of global cybersecurity through collaboration with us today, of course, innovation and advocacy. He is also a champion of and has created and promoted, the affordable and effective cybersecurity standards that benefit businesses of all sizes with a strong focus on supporting SMBs. Jason, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, mate. Good to be with you. Last time we were recording, I think we were around an even bigger table, weren't we?
Yes, we were.
Yeah, so I think we had a few extra bodies around, but good to be with you and Jono today. So looking forward to this.
Excellent.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you, mate. Thanks for the invite.
Now, Jason, I think you travel around a lot.
I do.
And you
Flew
speak
in from Brisbane to Sydney this morning.
Exactly.
Yep.
So you are in front of people all the time talking about this stuff.
Yep.
What's it like traveling around, being an advocate in your capacity, doing what you do? What's that like? Just give us a feel for you and what you're doing.
Yeah, I think Australia is very different, in all the markets. So I think, we tend to, because the bigger cities are Melbourne and Sydney, that most people tend to focus there. But it's the nuance or the differences between each state is quite stark. Somewhere like I was in Perth last week. Perth, completely different market. They're having a mining boom over there, and the needs and the wants and the money that's floating through there. With the large mining companies, they're actually able to afford really big cyber teams.
Right.
Unlike a lot of other markets at the moment where people are tightening their belt. You go somewhere like Tassie, completely unique in a lot of ways, and Darwin, where I was last week as well. So, and then you go Adelaide, are sort of moving more towards space cyber in a lot of ways as well. So each city has something a bit different. North Queensland, again, different to being in Brisbane yesterday. So we have a very unique country. And then obviously Canberra being very, sort of government-centric. I think in the country here we have 1 in 5 people actually work or are linked directly to government, either at a state or federal level. I think Elon Musk is trying to clean that up over in the US at the moment. He might want to come over here and do a follow-up.
You've gone straight there.
It took us 3 minutes to get into
you said you wanted to make it interesting.
Let's go.
Let's hook it up. So
I'm ready.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, look, we're stoked to have you here, and we're going to get into it.
Yeah, let's go. I think, look, we always start the show with a bit of an industry insight, current events, this sort of thing. And I think there's some interesting topics that, Jason, in your capacity, you're probably uniquely positioned to offer us some commentary. Earlier this year, the standard SMB 1001 was launched. That's a cyber standard that's targeting specifically Australian mid-sized businesses. Mm-hmm. And I know offline, you and I and Nara were discussing what that is and why it's important.
Yep.
It is a new standard, but I think it's going to help us get some real cut through and make a difference to help Australian businesses protect themselves from cyber threats. Look, there's a lot of new legislation, compliance legislation. Maybe we can just start off with, why do we need a new standard in this market in Australia when it comes to cybersecurity?
Yeah, that's multi-framed, that question really. The fact is that, 98.3% of businesses in Australia are classed as SMB, which is, 20 or less staff. Now, it only ticks up to 99 if you add that up to 200 or so staff. So that's a big chunk of the market. So backbone of this country, and not just Australia. So we started here, it was called Cyber Certification in Australia, like when we first started. And we were doing it really in alignment with what the government here in Australia was looking to do. So when Claire O'Neill was the minister here, remember she was looking to do a cyber health check, for small business. So you need to tailor that pretty specifically. It's a different need to what we look at and see when we look at the top end of town, with banks and critical infrastructure where the SOCI Act sort of has focused. So basically what happened with that framework, with Peter Maynard and Ryan Coe and the team is we basically said, let's look at the best standards around the world and take out almost that Pareto's principle, that sort of 80-20, principle of what's the best bang for buck for business. Where can you start at a bronze, silver and gold level and give them something that they can be handheld with an MSP or an MSSP to get up to the standard as required. So, ultimately the goal is if you want to go black belt, you can end up at ISO 27001, but it is a mix of the best parts like NIST, the Essential 8, all those other frameworks which come in. So we were looking local to start with, Jono, and then to your question there, we've gone international as of November 1, 2024. So it's now Dynamic Standards International as an international standard, and we've had a lot of interest from around the world since launching.
Would you, if you were to say, do a temperature check on SMB in Australia, would you say that there's a degree of anxiety and apprehension around threats? Because obviously security is a hot topic. We know that our audience, for example, are always eager to hear from us. We're obviously a SOC provider, so this will always be a hot topic, at least in our customer base. But within SMB particularly, and to your point, if you've provided for a consolidated position, as you have, to make the guidance perhaps more digestible, is that in the face of real anxiety and perhaps some apprehension in the SMB world around cyber and cyber threats?
Definitely. They just don't know where to start.
Right.
So, we talk about even the basics that the government tried to launch earlier this year with Act Now, Stay Secure, which was, passphrases, multi-factor authentication updates when available. Now, most businesses don't even have that as a baseline to come into, right? Let alone what you actually need and the sort of software, services you guys offer, right? So a SOC, ideally, is where, you want to be, and that's what we look to attain or where we want to get people to. But you've got to start somewhere, You can't build a house or put the roof on without the foundation. And I think a lot of businesses get into business, often accidentally. They realise, I need to do a business name. I need to, register for GST and they're the parts that they get guided in. But cybersecurity is still fairly new and businesses don't know where they start. And then they just plug their computer straight in, start interacting with the rest of the world and start collecting people's personal identifiable information and their systems are wide open to attacks, and the quickest way to go out of business is, the strike rate's pretty low. I think 80% of businesses go out of business in the first 5 years.
Right.
You throw on top, you get a cyber attack, they can bring that on a lot quicker because, you can stuff up an order or, not pay your GST and there's consequences. But if a cyber criminal gets into your business and wipes out your bank account, that can be game over.
Yes.
Yeah, look, so important. And I think that's right. Australia's a unique market. Something that Naren and I grapple with out there, speaking to customers in the mid-market, SMB and up into mid-market. A lot of the leading technology vendors in this space are based out of North America. And I think their view of SMB is very different to ours. We're a smaller market. It's a little bit unique. Something that a lot of business leaders that I speak to struggle with is they go, every time someone mentions the word cyber, I just cringe because, there's people with their hand out. It's like cyber equals I've got to spend some money on something. I'm not I feel like it's important. There's a lot of fear, uncertainty and doubt thrown into how those products are positioned. They seem expensive. I don't even know what good looks like. Somebody told me I need to comply with ISO 27001, but then I looked into that and it's $100,000 just to get an audit. And I feel like maybe this standard is trying to get some cut through and bring some practical things that those organizations can do to be secure that might not even cost a lot of money.
It's exactly that, right? The thing is that I think if you have a sort of third party that sort of says, here's something that you can actually fill in and you can be handheld by your MSP or MSSP to go through that process. And at the end of it, we can almost do a diagnostic and see where your holes are, and we're looking across all industry then, I think an MSP or an MSSP's hardest point is exactly that. They think they're just being sold to, right? And we all got to live, we've all got to make money. And I think generally speaking, most MSPs or most businesses are actually trying to help the customer, and they will be looking for, well, actually you don't need that. That's overlap. You're paying double here. You don't need that sort of thing. I think the SMB 1001, what it does is it sort of says, it's not us saying it. It's this sort of third party framework that you've filled in. And from that, we can see here's where the holes are. You then can have a sit down conversation with them and say, okay, let's have a look at what your budget is. And then we can really recommend what your biggest bang for buck is. So we can say, let's focus, especially in year one, if you only got that budget, on this part. This is key. This is critical. We need to fix that up. And then in years 2 and 3, maybe we can roll out and look at these other things. And you've got a guidepost then. And being a dynamic standard, it means it changes year on year. So unlike other standards that sort of sit stagnant sometimes for 5 or 6 years, this is a dynamic standard. So as a steering committee, we're always looking and saying, what are the new threats? AI, obviously, you guys probably wouldn't have mentioned that in this show before. But AI and what consequences that have on cybersecurity, and how does the standard need to reflect that? So I think that helps everyone in the industry, is that saying that it's not us. So you filled this in. It's almost like a doctor's diagnostic. How much you drink per week, what's your blood pressure, all that sort of thing. You make recommendations based on samples that you've taken from the person themselves, and this will help with the business and suggestions.
Yeah, look, great conversation. I think it's definitely needed, right?
Yeah.
Definitely needed. Something that Australian business can anchor themselves to, that's relevant to them, independent. They don't have to be speaking to 5 different organizations and be getting 5 different, recommendations around what good looks like. It's really hard to navigate, and it usually results in spending too much money or buying the wrong thing. So yeah, really, really important.
And I think, Jono, on that too, I think we need to really push sovereign, right? So Australian businesses, to help out and assist there as well. I think, part of what we're doing with the Australian Cyber Network is to actually set up, we've got the assets for AU Cyberscape, AU Cyber Explorer. That'll be a place where people can go who are looking for solutions as well, and they can get married up with the right sort of solutions providers as well, and try and push sovereign first. Because you spoke about North America and other areas. That's where most of the product tends to be bought. And the government talks about buying sovereign solutions, but do they do it? And we need to find out that build that bridge between how does government procure sovereign solutions and how do sovereign solutions match up, so they can actually jigsaw that together and actually make sure that matches. That's not happening at the moment. That's something we'll look to do as well.
Yeah, Australian buying Australian for Australians.
It's almost like the Buy Australia, like the logo.
Yeah.
We'll do a similar thing with the cyber, right?
Yep.
And I think we could almost pie chart it on our system to say how much is sovereign owned. So like you guys know, Jono and I, Jono set up like CyberAware and assisted with a business here in Australia. That's fully Australian owned, Australian servers hosted here, Australian code base, everything like that. So you could say that's 100% Australian. And then when people are buying in the market, they can actually say that's 100%. Whereas other companies might have, share ownership and servers offshore and stuff like that. People need to know that sort of stuff as well. If we're really talking about proper sovereignty, we need to be clear with that.
Yeah, super important. Look, great conversation. We'll be right back after this break.
All right, so we're back. Now we're going to get into the customer scenario here, and I have to say this is one that we come across quite often. Let me lay it on you, right? You're a new CISO, you're contemplating building a team. You're formulating your own roadmap and vision, and you're trying to evaluate, do I need a SIEM? Do I need one, right? Is that a worthy investment? And then in addition to that, should we run this thing ourselves or should we outsource? Are you hearing this, Jono?
All the time.
Right.
This conversation is such a mixed bag, right? I think we're even talking about this this morning. I kind of see 3 types of, call it levels of maturity or requirement out there in the market. We've got an organization who's, as you described, we've made some investment in some security skills. There's some acknowledgement that this is important to our business. And now we're exploring, okay, how do we level up? Do we need a SOC? Do we need a SIEM? Log ingestion, MDR, XDR, all of the acronyms.
Can we assume everybody knows what a SIEM is at this point?
Well,
and do you guys kind of just say, do you get the SIEM versus EDR question, or like what's the difference in?
Yeah, we get a lot of those conversations. I think that's a certain type of maturity level. These are organizations that probably have figured out Essential 8 maturity level 2. They know passwords are important. They're on a journey to zero trust. They've got some things sorted out, and now they want to level up. Right. Then we've got organizations who are already doing that. They did it. They bought in probably 2 or 3 years ago. They're on their first refresh cycle. Is the tech still relevant? Am I paying the right amount of money for that tech? Should I insource? Should I outsource? Can I do this better? There's those ones. And then there's the ones who are going, okay, maybe I need to reconsider my tooling strategy.
Yep.
Right. I've been all in on this cyber thing. We've had maybe 2 or 3 different people in charge over the last 5 years, and they're actually building up technical debt as it relates to cyber. And they got a lot of disparate tools. So now consolidation is becoming important because it's getting too expensive to stay one step ahead of the threats.
And everyone's sort of cutting budgets or just not expanding on them.
That's right.
That's right. So we kind of get, I think a mixed bag. But obviously the specific scenario we're talking about, new CISO, building a team, do I insource, do I outsource?
Yep.
All the time.
Yep.
All the time. I think it's very customer dependent. I've got some strong views on what you should probably do based on what I've seen, and I know you do too, Naren. Love to talk it through. Like, what are you seeing out there?
I think it's a lot of responsibility on CISO's shoulders here, and I think one of the hardest places to be a CISO is in Australia. It's one of the ones where if you make a mistake, you're gone. There's no second chance, and I think their teams, generally speaking, are pretty small. They're often inheriting a team that's already been there before, and it takes a while to find the right people and bring them in as well. So any support you can get externally, the good thing is if you get the external help is that they're tapped into the rest of the market as well. Sometimes you're only in your own environment, and if you're reliant just solely on yourself, you can miss some stuff, right? So if you can tap into external sources, then that actually gives you a broader range feedback from the rest of the market on what's being seen. So I think it helps to have some assistance in that.
Well, look, I think we've seen the guidance firm up on this thing. Like, wasn't that long ago there was recommendations on central log management, and then that has now matured to reference SIEM specifically. I would say hopefully most organizations know what a SIEM is. There's various SIEMs out there in market. So that is obviously a key decision. When we talk about insourcing or outsourcing, contemplating 24/7. And what does minimum viable product look like for 24/7? Now, I asked this question internally this morning. In fact, how many people do you need to run a 24/7 service? And the answer I got back was 7.
Minimum of 7.
Minimum of 7 people.
And imagine we're coming up to Christmas time as well. Now, the biggest time to attack in Australia.
Right.
Everyone knows we're, Christmas, New Year, pretty much everyone's shut down, right?
That's right.
And that's when the businesses get attacked the most. So again, if you can rely or lean on someone that can give you that coverage outside your own team, because cost, right?
That's right. There's 2 key questions there. 1, do I need a SIEM? 2, is 24/7 important? Now, if I think about the incidents that our team manage, for example, that they're busiest at like 1, 2, 3 in the morning. They are busiest, right? So I know what my answer would be to that, but this stuff has a cost attached to it.
I think that's right. One of the strongest arguments for insourcing versus outsourcing is, do you actually have the budget to put together a dedicated model and do that 24/7 coverage properly? Like, if that's the direction that you're going and that's what good looks like for you, gold, silver, bronze, ISO, or whatever standard you want to use. But if that's the direction that you're going in, 7 people, we know that in our own business, we've been doing it for nearly 20 years, 7 people minimum because of the shift patterns.
That's
on
right.
24/7. People get sick. They need to take holidays. There's weekends. People need to sleep. Do you have the budget for 7 people? Now, for most Australian business, especially, we're talking about Australia being unique. It's only really, in the big scheme of things, a handful of businesses in Australia that actually employ more than 200 people. 7. That's a lot. That's a big investment. Shifting to a outsource model, or rather what I'd prefer to call it would be a co-op model, and leveraging a pool of resources to help augment your team it's
hard to do numbers on it too, isn't it? Right? Because if you do sales and marketing, it's pretty easy. I marketed, I got this many leads, we made that many sales. It's a pretty easy sell, right? But as a CISO talking to the CFO or the CEO and pitching that if we get an attack, we could lose this much money. But what's the chance of that happening? Well, pretty high. But how high, really? Do I give this money out to try and protect the possibility of that happening? And the only benefit of an attack for the market is that it actually scares the shit out of those sort of people. They'll go do something. So when we had those high attacks that happen, within sort of a 7-month period that everyone knows about here in Australia, that actually got everyone on their toes for a while, and then they actually started to look at it more seriously and saw the effect. it's sort of dropped off again, right? So and our budgets are tight. We're in a tight budgetary sort of sense from a business point of view, but it only takes an attack or a series of them to cause some real damage, and the cost of that's pretty high. So that overlap, it's a challenging thing. If you guys come up with the way you could do numbers on that, I'd be interested, because that's a difficult part, I think, for everyone.
I would open that up to our audience. Now, here's for anybody listening to this podcast, and hopefully it's all of Australia, but whoever's listening, it's a question: how important is 24/7 in your security strategy? We'd love to hear from you. Give us a message, give us a DM, something. I'd love to know how important that is.
Yeah, would it be important to you to detect an anomaly or a threat before the start of business?
Right.
Before your team shows up at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, because you do set those patterns are exactly as you said, early hours of the morning.
Yeah.
I know, people are off duty or less likely to be alert.
Yep.
That's the time to get in.
That's right. And to the question of SIEM. So for businesses deciding, do I need a SIEM or can I live without a SIEM? Perhaps I think, and you've in part answered this prior, there may well be other investments that are more important before you land on, do I need a SIEM?
Yeah.
Getting the basics right.
But something you should be talking about early, we go back a step when we talked about the SMB 1001. If you've got a roadmap of where you want to be, sometimes if something happens, you can sort of move things forward or back, depending on that. At least you've got a plan.
That's right.
Right. I think that saying that most people aim at nothing in life and hit it with tremendous accuracy is pretty accurate in cybersecurity a lot of the time. People are only reactive to things happening rather than actually planning what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And especially if we talk about incident response, a lot of people miss the boat there as well.
Yeah.
Shuffling a bit of paper around a table is not an instant response plan.
We've talked about this before. I think just thinking about cyber, do you know what good looks like for your organization? I think that's critical.
And also your sector.
Yes.
Because I think it's sector specific, a lot of this stuff too. You can say, for you, and how do you compare to peers and other people that are doing well in that sector as well?
Yep.
I think that's right. That speaks to that question of, am I overinvested or underinvested? Right? What is actually the appropriate level of investment? This is something that the C-suite grapples with, boards are grappling with, business owners are grappling with.
Use an analogy, right? It's similar. And I think if you talk to them, and what we use is, how do you protect your physical security? So at your business, what do you have in place? Do you have cameras? Do you have alarms? Do you have deadbolts? So what level of security? Do you have passes to go in and out of the building? Now, a business is deciding when they're doing that, how much we need to protect the physical aspects of our business. Now transfer that to online. And I think you need to say, okay, well, how much risk are you willing to take or not take based on a budget and what you sort of think you should be protecting, and sort of work it out from there. So you've got to choose what your risk is. Some people, like we always talk about the crown jewels. What's the main thing you want to protect? Now, often people are protecting stuff because it's in their benefit from a financial sense, not because it's protecting someone else's data and stuff like that. They couldn't care less about that, right? So there's a balance on what the business is about and what they actually care about. So intrinsically, it's what the business actually gives a shit about is actually more key than anything else.
Yeah, really interesting. I think that physical security analogy is a nice one. So well, actually, if you can get your head around the investments that you make on back to base alarms and security patrols or whatever it is, because you want to protect your inventory, or maybe you've been broken into before and you understand what that meant for your business, and so then that's why you haven't made these investments.
Or a fire, like I've seen, I've had a mate had a fire in his business, $12 million cost,
right,
and it was just a massive warehouse full of stuff, so a fire is like a cyber attack or something like that as well, right? So you should got to try and cover it, and that was early hours of the morning.
Yes.
No one there to put it out. The fire brigade get there, but it's well light and it's all over.
I think that's some good practical advice, for any CISOs listening, or even, in a lot of businesses, it's the IT guy.
Yeah.
Who's trying to, now this is on their plate as well.
Yeah.
Right. How do I tell a better story? Because I can see we need to go from here to here. But actually telling the right story, having analogies, making it real for business owners to understand.
We've got to change the conversation. So us talking here, we understand, SIEMs and EDR and all that sort of stuff. But when these CISOs are having that conversation with the next level, whether it be the CFO, the CEO, they've got to put it in terms that they can relate to. I think too often they get stuck in the technical conversation. It's like, this is why it's important. That if you give the basics of analogy, and going back to that one we spoke about before, when I spoke to the government when they were doing that Act Now Stay Secure, I said, you've got to make, like, really a password manager, I think, is better than passphrases. And we'll say that's a seatbelt. in your business. And multi-factor authentication is the airbags. And then, the updates when available is like servicing your car. People understand cars. So I know seatbelt. If my seatbelt doesn't work, the airbag's there to protect me. And then if I get my car serviced, I know the brakes are going to work and that the windscreen wipers are going to be able to see out the windscreen. That's how you sell a campaign, right, to the Australian public. You don't talk about get passphrases, multi-factor authentication updates when available. What the fuck does that mean? It's to the average person, you might not be hitting the mark, but if you talk in those sorts of terms, they get it.
You're bringing it back to the working man, Jason.
Yeah, well, that's what we're here for.
That's what we're here for.
I was going to put
That's
the singlet
right.
on, but you said no.
That's fine.
Singlets are in our future on this podcast, I think.
It definitely could be.
But summer.
That's what it's all about. Straight talk, real solutions.
Yes.
And for our listeners out there, think about some great analogies. Tell a good story, bring it to life that way, and look at some practical use cases and standards to figure out if you're underinvested and overinvested. Yeah. And if 24/7 is important to you, there's a real life stat: 7 people. We'll be right back after this break. All right, let's rip in. We're back with a subscriber question. Right now, this one's I'm actually going to claim this question because I'm curious.
Okay.
Jason.
That's not how this is supposed to work, John.
Look, I'm hijacking the show. I'm hijacking our guest, and it's my prerogative.
Okay.
So let's go. Jason, how did you become a LinkedIn top voice?
I think that complete accident. I got onto LinkedIn very early, I think, when it first started. Back I think when I was doing Starwood Whiskey and maybe the gold business or something like that, so well before I got cyber. And I think then when we did sort of new domain and then into CyberAware, I started to sort of advertise a bit on there or sort of just talk about. So CyberAware was about cyber education and phishing and stuff like that. So it was good to sort of talk to the audience and educate. I think I sort of came from the educate rather than sell sort of part. And I think it sort of just sort of flowed on from that. And then you just sort of pick up followers. And I think it's over 32,000, something like that, followers now, but they've just come mainly from, I think, I don't try and sell stuff on there. So I try, like the message like we're talking about here, get the message out there. How can you help or give something to the audience that actually helps them? And then they'll go reshare it and stuff like that.
There's a bit of a serious aspect to this. I think everybody's, interested in people who've built a bit of a profile and a following, and, social media is so important for getting messages out there. But I feel like specifically within the security industry, we could all do well to tell better stories.
Yeah, 100%. I think I've only really focused on LinkedIn, but I really probably should. And I've sort of thought about this. I had some friends that do really well on Instagram. I've got a mate who's got 75,000 followers. Another one did a faceless channel that got up to, was Sober Renewal for people who are trying to get off alcohol or drugs or whatever. And it was a faceless channel. She's over 200,000 subscribers since the start of the year when she started, So I think I'd love to get the message out, but I think it is from telling stories and from doing this. So these sorts of things I'm always keen on because, like some of the topics we've covered, cutting through, right? So the getting the message that's a bit outside the norm, and trying to say that paradigm shift, look at stuff a bit differently, because what we're doing is not working. So if we keep doing it, it's that definition of madness. Do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. We need to shift it up a bit, and that's what we're trying to do with the Australian Cyber Network and with stuff I do with DSI and Murph and all the stuff I'm doing. Each one is trying to basically move the needle on cybersecurity.
You've said something interesting there. Are we winning? Are we heading in the right? We're not winning.
No, nowhere near it. I think we're actually going backwards, although the figures in some ways don't show that. I think it's an under-reporting issue rather than that it's not happening.
Right. I
think people are getting ransomware, or there's a sort of stigma and embarrassment, I think, getting a cyber attack. I was on 6PR last week over in Perth, and the guy said he got one of those letters, it says, we recorded you, interfering with yourself, and, we'll try and blackmail them to get some money or something like that. He says, I do that all the time. And if they've got that recording, that's fine. He's no problem, but some people might take that a bit more seriously, right? But these things are happening all the time, and I think with AI, now the targeting of that, it's actually getting a lot better. The amount of data that's out there from Australia, we've got the most personal identifiable information per capita out there than anyone, due to Optus and Latitude and Medibank and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of information out there about Australians. We are very targeted. We're perceived as being a wealthy country as well. So all these things together make us a prime target, to focus on. But I think it's under-reporting. So if you read the ASD report and you see there's a slight drop from the ACSC numbers of report, how is that when the attacks are going from every 8 minutes to every 6 minutes? How is it increasing in attacks, but we're getting a drop in numbers? It just doesn't equate. So I think it's an under-reporting issue.
Yeah.
So we're not winning, not close.
Wow. That's a sobering statement. And I think one that's pretty interesting.
Well, we want to fix it. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I've really in my own head given it 2 or 3 years to try and crack the nut as best I can to have a crack. But if we don't get the support in the back, I mean, it's a not-for-profit we're doing, so it's not like, and we're looking for charity status. I'm not going to make a lot of money out of it. I'm making no money out of it at all. But if someone doesn't try and do something, then nothing's going to happen. And you get the right sort of people following in, we'll be able to move it. But doing what we're doing now is not working.
Yep. Okay.
Great conversation. Some really interesting insights there. And for all of our CISOs and IT leaders out there trying to do better in cyber, telling great stories.
Yeah, I think, look, the CISOs in Australia, I know a lot of them and they're good friends. They have a decent crack and they're trying their best and they've got great teams and they build it up, but it's, you're pissing up against a strong breeze at the moment in Australia. So, yeah.
Well, there you go. We'll be right back after this.
Okay, we got a whole new segment. Jono, we like this, right? So this is from the Brains Trust that is our podcast architecture. Here we go, new segment. This is something that we're going to ask every guest.
Okay.
So you're the first one. Look forward to this. Jason, here we go. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions.
Mm-hmm.
These aren't specifically related to security, but you can answer however you would like to.
Okay.
That's your prerogative as our guest. Question number 1. If you had to cut 20% from your budget tomorrow, where would you start?
20% budget. Wouldn't even have a clue. No clue.
Okay.
No.
What do you
have
reckon,
to have
Jono?
a budget to cut in the first place.
Well, that's
is that right?
pretty much like it's actually, seriously, we are hand in, the hand in the hat out at the moment to try and get cash at the moment. So it's like, I'd love to see some money coming in. So many startups I've done I'm very frugal. I think I start with that. Every dollar is key. And I try and always, like whether it be started whiskey or the gold business or any of the business done, it's the value of a dollar is so key, right? So I start very frugally, and even traveling around everything like that, I'm always looking for the cheapest and best. And I think keep that in all facets of life. I think we always try and overextend in any part, but especially with cybersecurity, it's that, again, I go back to Pareto's principle, like go for where you're going to get the biggest bang for buck. I think some people are spending money on stuff they just don't need or don't do.
100%.
Right?
It's a core pillar of our service. It relates to both security and cloud. Quite often, we have to find savings to generate the interest in new projects and initiatives. It's on us. It's a prerogative that we take on as a service provider.
I reckon you can get 25 or 30% savings from most, if we're talking cybersecurity. When I've looked at most businesses and I've done stuff internally and looked at stuff, you can pretty much cut 25, 30% straight off the top pretty easily without too much effort.
That's right. Security, particularly like consolidation of products, going back to the value of the ecosystem, Jono, many of our customers don't realize the capabilities that they've invested in, particularly as it relates to Microsoft products. We bring that to life.
Microsoft's a classic, right? Yeah, that's why there's so much in there now that some people are paying for separate products, which is actually covered within there. Right?
That's right.
That's exactly where I was going to go with this. As it relates to cyber, I don't know if you wanted to talk about my household budget, Darren. I don't want to go there. I don't know what I'd cut it for 20%, but some different people.
I probably wouldn't ask you that question.
But as it relates specifically to cyber, tool consolidation.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Most of the organizations I'm out there don't actually realize they've already bought stuff that's overlapping with other stuff.
Sometimes 3 times, 4 times.
That's right.
Yeah. And, I go in and go, oh man, a classic one is they're on E5 and they're not using Defender and they've bought 3 other endpoint protection tools because
I've said
just reasons,
exactly
a guy who left bought it and it's still there. So
that's the legacy stuff. And
I would be attacking that technical debt as it relates to cyber.
Good answer. For somebody who said he didn't have an answer, Jason, you came up with one.
When it was 20%, I thought I can get 25, 30, but not.
All right. Question number 2. Here we go. What is the one piece of advice that you would offer for attracting the smartest talent to your team?
Oh, everyone's smarter than me, so that's not hard. So, I just have to hire anyone. No, but I think you really hire where you're weak. So really stick to your strengths. I think a lot of people say focus on your weaknesses, but I think get your strengths even stronger and then hire people that actually cover the stuff that you're really shit house at, whether that be, whether it's numbers or whatever the case is, any aspect, whether it's data, just get people that love doing what you hate doing and just hire those people.
Okay, cool. Question number 3, when you're evaluating a prospective partner, how do you spot the red flags that tell you they're not the real deal?
That's been experience. I fucked up a lot early on.
Right.
I got really rogered over pretty badly in
Right.
a few businesses. And I think I find it's in your trusted network. So it's people that you trust as well, actually referring people to you. Just hiring someone unknown is a difficult thing. And I just find that I hire people that I know or know through people that I know and trust, that I actually get people that way, I think is the best way.
I agree with that completely. We take advantage of that, Jono, right? So happy customers talking to other customers in the same
before
vertical.
We came in, you said, "Oh, do you know someone who, for the role that you're sort of
Correct.
looking at?" That's what I do as well. So
Yes.
I like Aaron. I'd say, "Okay, I'm looking for this. Can you help me with that?" And then I know that if they're referring them, it's usually a pretty decent person.
Yeah,
I think referrals are pretty important. It's interesting. Not every new customer that we deal with wants a referral. They may have, although most of the time they have had some experience or trust somebody who's dealt with us before.
Yep.
Right? They've probably already done that due diligence before they come to us. So referrals are a pretty powerful way of vetting.
And like
a potential
attracts
partner.
like, or you sort of hang in the same circles, right? So you find that if they're dodgy, they usually hang around together, and if they're usually pretty decent, they hang around with each other as well. So that's usually a good guide.
Yep. All right. Very good.
All right. Thanks for listening in, everyone. If you've enjoyed the show, then don't forget to subscribe to Cloud Reset on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And of course, follow us on LinkedIn so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay tuned. We drop a new episode every 2 weeks and we have more special guests to come. That was Cloud Reset, straight talk, real solutions.